Hey guys, so I want to start a series on my channel where I read books that are about my favorite trope. And this week, you would know from the title that I'm doing time travel.
Hi, editing me here. I had to scrap most of my intro because I filmed that back in April and I said that I was going to have this done within a week or so, and it's now July. Clearly it took me longer than a week, but I did just want to come in here and say a couple things about my favorite time travel stories. Two of my favorite time travel stories is About Time, which is a movie that stars Rachel McAdams, and The Girl Who Left Through Time, which is another movie but it's an animated movie. I love both of them so much, and I was trying to figure out while putting together this video what about those two stories makes me love them as much as I do. And I think when it comes to time travel stories is the sense of nostalgia that a lot of them have, how they can really be about the relationships in someone's life and just like being grateful for having those there for you, and also the consequences of changing things and taking things for granted, and how you should be grateful for not only who you have in your life but also what's happened in your life and all that. I just love it. Anyway, I just wanted to put that out there because those were the kind of stories I was kind of hoping to find when I put this video together, and I'll let you see how that all turned out. I have started Timeline. I'm currently 185 pages in this, and we have just traveled to the past now. The slow, I guess you could say, start didn't bother me too much because the way this book is written, it's very thriller-like, so it's very quick and fast to read. There's this guy found in the Arizona desert, old man, and he's wandering around, he's blabbering all this gibberish that the people who find him don't understand. There's this organization that's involved that he worked for. This organization is the organization that has created time travel, but there's something fishy about them. I don't know what's going on with them right now, and I have seen the movie. I saw the movie a very long time ago, but I don't remember most of it, so I don't know what they're up to, but they are very suspicious. Then we're following a group of archaeologists. They're all like young grad students, so they're all like in their early mid-20s, and they are in France at the moment on this archaeological site. The professor they're all working under, he leaves, he goes away, and he's gone missing, and it turns out this professor has come into contact with this organization who has made time traveling possible, and this professor has time traveled into the past and he's lost in the past. This organization have gone to France. They've come into contact with the grad students. The organization said, do you want to go back in time to collect your professor because you guys all study history, you are experts, like you can do this, because the organization don't think they're capable because of their lack of knowledge of that time period and how they won't be able to blend in. And now we've just followed the students who have gone back. So now they're in medieval France. The part I just finished, it just got quite a bit sciencey. I understood enough of it to make sense of the story and to make sense what was going on, but when they got really in depth with the physics, I was they were just kind of explaining how the time traveling is happening, because I was up to the part where they were time traveling. And the other thing I like is there's maps throughout it, and there's like little sketches and things throughout it, which I don't think you would expect. I mean, I didn't expect it when I first picked it up, but yeah, it's a little nice addition. So I finished Timeline by Michael Crichton. I overall did enjoy this. I think Michael Crichton is just brilliant when it comes to his concepts. He is the genius behind Jurassic Park. If his name sounds familiar, that is probably why. I believe he also wrote the script for the original Westworld. The concepts he comes up with are absolutely incredible, but what I think he also does really fantastically with those concepts is he backs them up with facts. He was a doctor, I believe, and I think he also was a professor of science at a university. I just know he's very well educated, and that definitely shows in his books and the way he explains in this particular book how time travel is possible. And I think that's something that's really strong. His concepts, and then also the fact that he's able to back it up and make it believable. I did do a bit of a Google search, and Michael Crichton's books are described as techno thrillers. It's a subgenre of thriller, I guess, where it's like a mix of sci-fi and thriller. What would often happen was, and this is where my interest would wave in and out, was there were points of the story where it was so suspenseful, so action-packed. You have these kids stuck in 14th century France, right? And the medieval period is a dangerous period to be in, and you felt that danger. And then the other intense part of it was, so there's this countdown. So you can see here and here that at each break, the countdown's going backwards, and they do have to get back to the present in a certain amount of time, because if they don't, then they're stuck in the past. So we have the medieval and the countdown element that is really creating the suspense, and then we had, you know, just a lot of action scenes. But there were points where it was like action scene after action scene. I personally found how there was a repetition in the action scenes and in the things that were happening in the plot a bit boring and tiresome. I think I will settle on a 3.5. I am definitely interested in reading more of Michael Crichton's books. I have read a couple already, but I do really want to read Jurassic Park, and I've heard Spear is supposed to be one of his best books, so I'm very interested in that. I started listening and I've made my way through 60% of the audiobook for Here, Now and Then by Mike Chen. I think that's the name of it. It might be Here and Now and Then and not commas. So this book follows a time traveling agent, and he is from the future, about 100 years into the future from our current time period, and he time traveled into our period for some mission. Instead, he ended up finding a wife and starting a family. What ends up happening is another time travel agent from the future, his current time, comes to him and takes him back to his actual time. Did that make sense, or did I just say time way too many times? Because he wasn't supposed to start the whole family up. Not allowed, it's not right. He's gone back to his current time, but he actually has two families, one in each time period. A wife in the future, which is his present time period, and then a wife and a daughter in his past, our present time period, so around, the year we're currently in. An issue that I'm having with this book is there's a lack of detail. So we're told that this guy is a time travel agent and that he traveled into the past, but we don't really know much about this agency that he's working with. We don't know the original reason why he went back into the past. I'm assuming he had some kind of mission, but it just says he went back into the past because he's a time travel agent, and that's all the explanation we're given. The other issue I had was one of the side effects of time travel is he has memory loss, so he doesn't remember his actual life in the future. He sort of gets little flashes here and there, but he also knows he has to keep his identity of being this time travel agent a secret. He doesn't tell his family. So it was a lot of effort to try and pick and pull out the information that feels like I've picked up the second book in a series without having read the first, and I stopped the audiobook and did a 30-minute research on the internet just to make sure that this is not part of a series. It is a standalone. I checked. The author has one other book and I read the synopsis of that, and it has entirely different characters, so Goodreads doesn't have it listed as a series, so I'm going off that. I recommend not reading the synopsis because what's actually written in the synopsis doesn't really come into play until 55% of the way through the book, which is so annoying when the book does that. In terms of writing, I don't think the author is a bad writer, but I do think the story just needed a lot more meat, or needs a lot more meat to make sense and to kind of build the story, because there's so many cool elements. The ideas are there. There's some really cool ideas. If you've picked up the physical copy of this, let me know if you had a better experience.
I completed the audiobook for Here and Now and Then. As I was saying in my first clip, was the way the information was delivered in the story was not neat, and also made it difficult for me to piece the story together. I found that the combination of this character lying to his family because he had to lie about being a secret agent, that is something that is legally not allowed to be common knowledge, and the fact that he also had memory struggles didn't help build his character. I found it difficult to understand his character and to get a full round picture of who his character was, and to understand his struggles and conflicts and choices, and being torn between these two different families from these two different time periods. And it's a shame because this was definitely more of a character focused story rather than a action-packed time traveling story that follows a time travel agent. Yes, it does follow a time travel agent, but it's not about him being a time travel agent, about him having these two different families from these two different time periods. And I just think that the mark was missed on creating his character, and it was the focus, unfortunately. Unfortunately, I'm giving this one 2 stars.
Oh no!
So I decided that Passenger was going to be the next book to pick up. I'm currently on chapter 11, so I'm about 47% of the way through. I'm listening to the audiobook. I'm really liking it so far. We have time travel, which I love. We have secret societies and family secrets, which I also really love. And I love that we were on the sea. We actually started off on the sea. That's one of my favorite things. We start off with following this girl in present day, and she is this violinist prodigy. She's just had her concert. She meets this random girl, and this girl pushes her through this door, and she is back in the 1700s, and she finds herself on this ship. The way the time traveling works in this is there's a lot of secret families, and the ability to time travel is something that is inherited, which really reminds me of the Ruby Red. I don't know if that's the actual trilogy's name, but the first book was called Ruby Red, and that is also a time traveling book, and it's about secret families and secret societies. I wouldn't recommend it because it's kind of problematic. The reason she's been taken into the past is to do with the secret families and secret societies and their secret agendas. I just said secret way too many times. We would say though that the plot's only just really started to unfold, so if you're someone who needs the plot to happen very early on in the book, I don't know how you would feel about this, because you might find it quite slow, because the plot has really just started to unfold where I'm at, and I'm basically at the halfway point. So the girl who pulls Etta back into the past, her name's Sophia. I don't like how she's written. She's very villainized, which is so unfair, because even though she is someone who can time travel, she is the person from the past. Being a woman back then isn't great, and I really don't like how it is not really
sympathizing with her and she was really villainizing her, and she's very quick, yeah, just to judge this other girl. I expect her to be more understanding. Oh, the other thing I did want to add is I didn't really like how the time travel was explained. It was like in chapter 3 or 4. Etta and Sophia basically play like 20 questions and they just ask each other questions back and forth, like who they were and how time traveling works and why Sophia grabbed Etta. That's how we get the explanation of the time traveling, a quick explanation of Sophia's character. I just didn't like how the intimation of the story was delivered that way. It felt very forced, I would say. So I finished Passenger last night. I have really mixed feelings on this actually. There was just something missing for me. I think the first half of the book was actually stronger than the second half. A lot of the second half is just Nicholas and Etta together. They are separated from Sophia and everyone else we meet. And I think that was kind of part of the problem because I wasn't very interested in these two characters. I didn't really find them particularly interesting. And, you know, they were kind of just put in a situation where it was just the two of them so that they could develop romance. They were also, you know, kind of keeping secrets from one another and scheming and having their own agendas, and that was supposed to evoke some intensity to the story and between their relationship, but I didn't feel that. There was a lot of time traveling, right? And they didn't just travel throughout time, but they traveled through like different locations like France, England. They went everywhere. I honestly couldn't really tell the difference between a lot of the time periods they were at or the locations that they were at, but there were parts that I really did enjoy. Like I really did enjoy the way the families worked and how, you know, the whole time traveling things was kept amongst these secret families. I thought Etta's mother was a really interesting character because she had a lot of secrets. So she's a time traveler, but obviously she kept that secret from Etta because Etta didn't know when she originally time traveled, and I thought that was kind of interesting. I thought the ending was really interesting as well. There were a couple of reveals and a little bit of a twist, and yeah, I liked where the ending left off. Like I'm intrigued to find out what happens next. I wish she had kept the crew because at the beginning of the book when Etta meets Nicholas, they are on a ship and he kind of has his own little crew, and I think it would have been really fun to have all of them follow the story the whole way through, just to have like different dynamics play out and to explore their characters by using the other characters as well, but also getting to know the other characters, because I really just didn't think Etta and Nicholas, they just weren't interesting characters to me, and I think I'm gonna give it a 2.75. I also started the next book, Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. I'm flying through this. I'm already 156 pages in and this book isn't that long. I've wanted to read Octavia E. Butler for a really long time. She is a black woman as well, by the way. I don't think I said that. So this is on Voices. I can't really say I'm liking this. That seems to be an incorrect terminology to use for this book, but it's a powerful and impactful read. We are following a black woman from 1976. So this book was published in the late 1970s. And then suddenly one day she travels back into the past, into the early 1800s. And there she comes across this young boy who's 4 years old. His name is Rufus, and he nearly drowns, and she saves that boy from drowning. Then she's immediately thrust back into her time, but what ends up happening is she keeps being pulled back into the past, and each time she's pulled back into the past she's kept there longer, and she finds out that this boy Rufus is actually one of her ancestors. So she keeps going back to the past and she keeps saving this boy because she kind of has to, because he's her ancestor, so you know, without him she doesn't exist. But when she's pulled back into the past, because of the color of her skin, is assumed to be enslaved and is treated as such. I think that's really powerful about the story is because we're having this frequent back and forth to the past. Whenever Dana, that's the main character's name, goes into the past, it's always been a few years, and so when she goes, you know, back, she sees, like, you know, she starts seeing these children like Rufus, but she also sees these slave children, and she watches all these children grow up. She sees Rufus, who was a young ignorant boy, and you watch him grow into just like every other white man who's racist and is a slave owner, but you also watch the slave children who have to grow up into slavery. The way the time traveling is used to show like the life of these characters in the past is such a clever tool. I think the one thing I would say is Rufus is such a I just want to punch him in the face. I can't stand him, and I think Dana's character is a little bit too forgiving of him, or not harsh enough on him. I don't know, like where I'm at now, he's about 18-19 years old and he just did a few things that were just absolutely horrendous and shocking and in my eyes unforgivable, and I understand she has to continue helping him because without him she's not going to exist. I don't know, she's too nice to him, and I'm just like, no, I guess maybe she's trying to do it that way so she doesn't get in trouble because he's a white man, he can do whatever he wants. The way the entitlement of white men is written in this, and it's just so real and so terrifying. I just want to read you this bit out. So Dana in this, she's reading a book on World War II, and she's reading excerpts of collections of the concentration camp survivors. So stories of beating, starvation, filth, disease, torture, and every possible degradation, as though the Germans had been trying to do in only a few years what the Americans had worked at for nearly 200. That comparison really hit me. This is the kind of book I wish I read when I was in school. There's so much to unpack. I finished Kindred and I'm gonna give this 5 stars. Such an important story. The one thing I will say is, like, I did kind of find a bit frustrating how long it took Dana to see Rufus for who he was. Like, I feel like you figure out really early on that he's just a racist pig. It took her so long and she kept like forgiving him, and I was just like, no. It also provided a lot of context and education for those who have very bare minimum knowledge when it comes to slavery in America. It talked about like marriage, how if a black slave and a black slave married, they were never technically married. It didn't just talk about the conflict that happened between the slaves and their white owners on the plantation. It also looked at and showed how some of the black slaves turned against one another, and they would, you know, if one of the slaves tried to run away or did something that, you know, they're not allowed to do, then one of the other black slaves would go and tell their white owners to be in their good graces. The way this showed all the relationships and the complex dynamics of power over each relationships and how it worked was just really scary, first of all, and really interesting to read about. This story is ultimately a look at humanity and the lack of humanity. So I started Timekeeper by Tara Sim. This is a YA novel. There hasn't been any time traveling happening yet, but this is a steampunk book set in Victorian London. We are following this boy who is a clock mechanic. He's about 17 and his job is to go around and fix clock towers and manage them. Clock towers in this world are very, very powerful because they control time. What is so cool about this is there's actually a whole bunch of mythology interwoven into the story as well, and that gives reason to why the world has all these clock towers and why the clock towers control time. So if the clock tower breaks down somehow, so it might lose a numeral or something of the sort, it will impact how time in that town runs and it can eventually destroy it. So there's a lot of mystery to the beginning of the story, and there's a lot happening to clock towers around London that are impacting the towns and how time is flowing. I love this world. I love the steampunk elements. This main character in here is also gay, and at the very beginning he meets this boy who's about his age who he thinks is a new apprentice, and I'm only 90 pages into this book. As soon as you meet him, you know there's something up with that boy and things are sus, and I don't really want to say too much more, but I think this is the ghost romance book I've been hunting. The main character is called Danny. His dad is also kind of part of the mystery. You know that his dad was a clock mechanic, and that's why Danny also grew up to become a clock mechanic, but something happened to his dad. You're not really sure what all these mysterious kind of things are happening to the clock towers around London that are currently happening. I think that's somehow going to get intertwined with what happened to Danny's dad. It has been a while. I know for you guys it's been like 2 seconds, but I last updated this vlog in May, and it's July now.
Oops.
I did manage to finish Timekeepers. I finished this in June. I loved the start of this book. I was immediately captivated by the world. I loved how unique it was and how creative, and this isn't exactly a time travel novel. There's no real time traveling that goes on, but it does play with time, and time is the magic system, which was a really cool concept to explore. However, I do wish that it was explored more. I think the main issue I had with this book was the plot was lacking, and I felt less intrigued by it as it went on. However, I do have to say that I started getting very burnt out in May, which was when I first picked this up, because I was doing so many vlogs. I was working on like 5 or 6 vlogs, so my enjoyment may have been affected. I think what I wanted from this book though, in terms of the plot, was this is supposed to be the first book in a trilogy, and it read like a standalone to me. I really wanted this book to set up a good story that will be followed through to the next 2 books. Oh, and one other thing I found with this was it was one of those stories where everything ended up being fixed and going back to the way the protagonist wanted things to go back to. I really do prefer stories where change has been forced upon the protagonist, and maybe by the end of the novel they'll come to terms with that change, whereas in this it didn't do that, and I didn't like that. So that's a personal preference thing. I gave it 3 stars. I'm definitely going to continue on. And I did complete the last book, which is How to Lose the Time War. I started the audiobook of this and I was so lost. I was so lost. So I don't recommend the audiobook at all. The writing is so lyrical and detailed that you have to physically read it, because you just can't interpret the audiobook. I mean, maybe you can, but I definitely couldn't. I ended up getting the ebook. I did enjoy this book. We followed 2 main characters, Red and Blue, and those are their kind of like agent names, and they are on opposite sides of a war, but these 2 are communicating in letters, and they get to know each other very intimately. They even kind of start to fall in love with one another. I am actually going to reread this again, because there were the times where I wasn't entirely sure what was going on in the story. I'm not even sure how much time traveling was going on. Like there were bits I'm confused. I don't even know how to talk about it, and I feel like I sound like an idiot. By the end of it, I really was able to follow the actual narrative and know what was going on. But at the beginning, particularly like the first 100 pages, I was lost, which is why I'm struggling right now to give you a coherent thought and description of what this is about, because I was lost at the beginning and I don't want to tell you what happened from 100 pages on. So I'm definitely going to go back and reread this. I don't think this book will be for everyone, and if you're going to read it, I recommend not picking up the audiobook. And I decided to settle on a 4-star rating for How to Lose the Time War. And yeah, that's the end of this vlog. This vlog just feels like it's taking me a million years. Like I said, I started it in April and it's now July, which I'll have another vlog up soon where it's me reading another trope of mine that's my favorite. My favorite from this vlog was definitely Kindred, and I definitely did really end up enjoying How to Lose the Time War. It was not an easy read at the start, so I've got to go back, reread it, and reevaluate what actually happened and how I feel about it. But I really do hope you enjoyed this. Please leave a like time emoji in the comment if you made it towards the end. I'd really appreciate that, and knowing who made it towards the end. And if you did, like, seriously, thank you. I always worry that people stop like 5 minutes in, and I hope that you are enjoying whatever you're currently reading, and I'll see you next time. Bye.